Assault. 11 creepy Christmas memories. I was about 4 years old. The year was 85 and I was a hyperactive kid, rarely slept. And as excited as I was for Christmas morning, I was wide awake all night. I listened for my parents to move presents into the living room. I knew early on that the whole Santa thing was a ruse. And then I heard it. Rustling of paper and shifting of boxes. I snuck out of my room and peered around the corner, expecting to see my father or mother stacking the loot under the tree. What I saw was a stranger in a red jacket type thing and red pants. Thick black belt, holding his almost tunic closed, and snowy, muddy black boots with thick soles. He had white hair peeking out from his cap, and a bag empty on the floor. A single box was in his hands, wrapped in plain blue glossy paper. I was terrified because I thought someone had broken in to rob us. I took a sharp breath, and the man turned. He was older, with a beard, just a regular full beard, not like Grizzly Adams, and gave me the shh sign. I didn't scream. He motioned me over and called me by name. You shouldn't be awake. You're not supposed to see me. Keep it a secret. Tell no one. And Merry Christmas. Are you Santa? I asked him. He chuckled and nodded. Yeah, kid. Some call me that. Then he was just gone. Poof. I never went back to sleep that night and never told my mom about it until I was in my 20s. I want to start this off by saying, before graduating high school, I did not believe in any of the supernatural. But now, after being 7 years out of high school and having had to deal with this for about 5 years consecutively, I just need help and advice. It all started one Christmas while I was driving around looking at Christmas lights with my friends. We had been driving around for a while when we found a brightly lit house with lots of old antique signs, Coca-Cola signs, shoe-fixing shop signs, ice cream shop signs, etc. It had a roundabout around the main house that you could drive through. There was a small astronaut doll sitting on a swing high up in a tree, and at first we thought, oh, that's a little creepy, but it's cute. We went around once and then wanted to do so again. When we went around the second time, the doll was standing up. There was no way that a person could have done this, as the tree was very tall and would require a ladder to rearrange or take down anything. We all knew this was not part of any natural thing. We took off immediately and were trying to make it home as fast as possible. As we were driving home, myself in the driver's seat, all the street lights, one by one, shut off as we went underneath them. This was the first supernatural encounter I ever had, and I didn't want to believe it happened. I spent the next week trying to rationalize what happened, and I just couldn't. From then on, it became a thing. While not consistent, I began to see it more and more in my day-to-day life. By the time I went off to college, I had to warn my friends so they wouldn't freak out that there was a presence following me, and I didn't know if it was good or bad, but to not worry because it never hurt me. At this point, I just felt out of place, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was connected to something and couldn't be let go. I could go into all the encounters I've had since then, but we would be here all day. Am I connected to the spirit world now, or is something attached to me and not letting go? Help. My preschool class went to an old folks' home at Christmas time. I can't even remember why. Maybe we took crafts we had made and sang some Christmas songs or something. Anyway, somehow I ended up all alone, standing in front of an old man in a wheelchair. He didn't speak to me, but he had big tears streaming down his face. We stayed this way for what seemed like an eternity. I can't remember exactly what happened after, if someone came and took me away or vice versa. Maybe it's more sad than creepy. But to this day, I remember him like it was yesterday. I was 15 when I saw the shadow of what could have been Santa's sleigh. It was Christmas Eve, around 10 or 11 p.m. My parents are divorced, and on Christmas Eve, I used to go over to my mom's till around 10 or 11. Then my dad would pick me up, and we'd go to his house. They lived in the same city. So my dad and I arrive in the driveway, which is in an alley, and at the time, our garage door was broken. To get into the garage, you had to walk around the house, go in through the front, and then open it by hand from the inside. I ended up staying in the passenger seat of the truck while he walked around. This happened many times before, but the alley still gave me the heebie-jeebies because it was so dark. The only thing shedding light into it was from the neighbor's house that faced the entrance of the alley. So I was just sitting there, trying not to get creeped out, when I got the urge to turn around. I don't know why. I didn't want to turn out of fear, honestly. I just felt I should. So I turned around. Right behind our driveway was the neighbor's fence. It was dark wood, and I just stared at it and waited. And then it happened. The shadow floated across the fence. There were no reindeer or Santa, and although it looked more rectangular than anything, I was convinced it was Santa's sleigh. I had always loved Christmas growing up, and even though at the time when this happened I didn't believe in him anymore, it really sparked me to believe in him again. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense. It was just a feeling I had after seeing that. The whole experience made me feel that Santa was more of a spirit that brought joy to people rather than physical presence. I did see elves as a teenager. I saw it on a couple different occasions. Small people dressed colorfully, and they had those shoes with the long toes. They would dart fast when I looked in a room and saw them. Under a bed, behind a doorway. I would look at where they darted, but nothing. I was about 13 when these sightings happened. But no, I don't believe in Santa's elves. But those little people looked most like what people would say a Santa elf would be. I do see a lot of people and animals that aren't there. So I take that into consideration and chalk it up to one of those instances. But I'll never forget it. It's been 10 years, and I remember it vividly. I'm embarrassed to admit I do have a story about seeing Santa. I don't remember my age, but if I were to guess, it would be around 8 or 9. It was back when my parents were still together, and we lived in a house in rural Sweden. We have some different traditions here regarding Santa, so I grew up doing a lot of weird things like leaving a bowl of porridge on the porch at the night before Christmas Eve. It's an old Norse tradition from back when we believed we had hustumtar. Google is your friend here if you're curious. Our house was surrounded with woods, and it was always pitch black during winter. So one night I sat by the porch in the living room that looked out over the woods. I remember seeing a lantern lit up, and how a Santa-looking person walked across from left to right. He was sort of shining, like the entirety of him was glowing white. He held up a lantern and just walked, and suddenly disappeared out of thin air, and everything got dark again. I ran and told my mom that I saw Santa in the woods, and she basically thought I was imagining things. But she didn't say that she didn't believe me. She just expressed happiness over my vivid imagination. To this day, I remember it vividly, and I did not imagine it. I don't know what I saw, but I know for sure I saw something. The entire land was haunted AF. Growing up, I experienced a lot of weird things. But then my parents divorced, and now I live in the city and have had 0 paranormal experiences. My girlfriend told me a story from a time she saw Santa. She was like 8 or so. She says she went to get some water from the fridge, and her bedroom was the furthest from the kitchen. Along the way, she saw her sister, mother, and stepfather asleep in their beds. She said she heard something metallic, like bells or something. She peeked into the living room, where the tree was, and she caught a red pant leg and boot leaving around a corner. She said she freaked out and ran back to her room. She really doesn't believe in anything paranormal, but she has this one story. When I was a kid, probably 10 or younger, my family came to visit on Christmas Eve. Towards the end of the day, me, my brothers, and my grandpa went into the woods behind my house to walk around and explore a bit, I guess. There's a small lake back there and a short trail near it. I assume we took a short walk in the woods so that the rest of my family could wrap our presents or something like that. While we were walking along the trail that went around the lake and towards a gravel road, I swear I saw several dolls tied to trees on either side of the trail. The dolls were the fabric kind, sort of like a Raggedy Ann doll or a Cabbage Patch doll. They were old and weathered, like they had been there a while, and were tied to the trees with maybe jump ropes? If I remember right, the ropes were wrapped around the dolls' necks to tie them to the trees, and some might have been hanging, but I'm not 100% sure. I didn't really know it at the time, but with the silent and dead winter forest and the setting sun, the area looked like it was straight out of a horror movie. I don't remember anyone commenting on the dolls at all. Maybe my grandpa wanted to quickly get past them, since they were obviously creepy as hell. My brothers were way too young to remember any of this, and my grandpa doesn't remember it either. I swear I didn't make it up or dream it either. How could I, as a 10-year-old, even come up with such a terrifying scene like that, whether it be imagination or dream? This happened close to 15 years ago, so there's no way the dolls would still be there, and I'm not sure if I'd want to go back to check anyways. The older I get, the more I wonder if it was real or not, but it was just so vivid and specific, I feel like it had to be real. TLDR, I'm pretty sure I saw dolls strung up on trees in the woods on Christmas Eve as a child. You've stayed a while and listened. Here's a side quest. Head to the comments and tell me one thing that you hope to receive this Christmas, and be on the lookout for a thank you from me in a future video. Please continue to enjoy these Christmas stories. I was 4 or 5, and I woke to see Santa and a black man enter through my bedroom door. Santa had this bag and put something from it into my toy box at the far end of the room. All night long I kept waking up and trying to see what the toy was. When morning came, I went to look, and it was one of my regular toys, placed at an odd angle. Obviously, this had to have been a dream, but it seems so real, and it leaves me with a creepy feeling over 40 years later. Sorry in advance, this is not exactly a jolly story. When I was 7, we were visiting my grandparents for Christmas with all of my dad's siblings and their kids, as my grandmother was dying of breast cancer. She would pass sometime between when I went to bed on Christmas Eve and in the middle of the night. I was sleeping in the basement of their old farmhouse. There was a wood stove for heating the house down there. Now, as I remember it, I woke up to the sound of the fire crackling a lot, like if you burned cedar, which I'm pretty sure it was. I got all excited and thought it was Santa. I could feel a presence, and to my 7-year-old eyes, I could swear that there was an invisible person walking up the carpeted stairs, as I could see the footsteps pressing the carpet down as whatever it was ascended the steps. Around this time, I thought I heard someone whisper my name off in the direction that my little sister was sleeping. It was soft and raspy. Ninja. Ninja. Hey. Hey. Along with this, I could make out the silhouette of what I thought to be one of Santa's elves, sitting on a stool next to where my sister slept. It scared me, and I stayed as quiet and still as I could. Eventually, I felt the presence of Santa coming back down the stairs. The fire started crackling a bunch again, and then died down as the presence left. I stayed awake in bed until later when my fathers and uncles returned from the hospital with the bad news. They made us kids open our presents before they told us the next morning, though. Anyways, in retrospect, I want to chalk it all up to an overactive imagination. It was actually impossible for me to see anything other than the profile of the stairs, as I was sleeping parallel to them. And my sister was probably just breathing heavily, but that's how I remember it. When I was a kid, the day after Christmas, I would always check out the pawn shops near my grandparents' house so I could spend my Christmas money on used video games. There was one where the owner was very chatty, but always gave off a creepy vibe. I couldn't quite pinpoint why, but his shop always felt uncomfortable. Eventually, it came out that he had murdered his ex-girlfriend and incinerated her in the basement of the shop. He got away with it for 15 years until his sons testified against him. I fucking knew it. Thank you for listening. Want to listen to Reddit read by an actual person? Look no further. That's right. I will never utilize an AI voice to tell these stories. That's a promise. Please support this channel by hitting like and subscribing. Yours truly, Verrückte Salt.